Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. In today's Dhamma session, we're looking at Dhammapada Verse number 35, and it's the story of a certain bhikkhu who wished to tame the mind. The Dhammapada commentary tells us that at the time the Buddha was residing at Jetavana Monastery, and on one occasion, after obtaining a meditation subject from the Buddha, 60 bhikkhus went to Mathika village at the foot of a mountain. There, Mathika Mata, mother of the village headman, offered them alms food. She also built a monastery for them so that they could stay in the village during the rainy season, the Vassa. One day she asked the group of bhikkhus to teach her the practice of meditation. They taught her how to meditate on the 32 parts of the body, leading to insight of the decay and dissolution of the body. Mathika Mata practiced with much diligence and attained path and fruit of a non-returner, anagami, together with the analytical insight and mundane supernormal powers. This was prior to the bhikkhus attaining path and fruit. When she emerged from the bliss of her attainment, she looked with the divine eye, dipacakku, and saw that although the bhikkhus hadn't attained path and fruit, they had the potential to attain arahantship. Through her insight, she recognized that they needed proper food, so she prepared good, choice food for them, and with proper food and right effort, the bhikkhus developed right concentration and eventually attained arahantship. Now at the end of the rainy season, the bhikkhus returned to Jetavana Monastery, where the Buddha was in residence. They reported to the Buddha that all of them were in good health and in comfortable circumstances, and that they did not worry about food. They also mentioned about Mathika Mata and her abilities, and that she would prepare and offer the very food that they wished for. When a certain bhikkhu heard them talking about Mathika Mata, he decided to go to spend some time in Mathika village. After taking a meditation subject from the Buddha, he arrived at the village monastery and found everything he had wished for sent to him by Mathika Mata. When he wished her to come, she personally came to the monastery, bringing along choice food with her. After taking the food, he asked her if she knew the thoughts of others, but she evaded his question and replied, "People who can read the thoughts of others behave in such and such a way." Then this bhikkhu thought, if I entertain any impure thought like an ordinary worldling, she is sure to find out. As a result of thinking this way, he became apprehensive towards Mathika Mata, so he decided to return to Jetavana Monastery. When he arrived back at Jetavana Monastery, he told the Buddha that he could not stay in Mathika village because he was afraid that the lay devotee might detect impure thoughts in him. The Buddha then asked him to focus on just one thing, to tame his mind. The Buddha also told the bhikkhu to return to Mathika village monastery and not to think of anything else but the object of his meditation only. The bhikkhu then went back. The lay devotee Mathika Mata offered him good food as she had done before, so he might be able to practice meditation without worry. Within a short time, he too attained arahantship. With reference to this bhikkhu, the Buddha spoke the following verse. Difficult to subdue, swift, flying towards wherever there is pleasure. It is profitable to tame the mind. A tamed mind brings happiness. At the end of this discourse, many of the assembled attained fruit of stream entry. There are a number of things that are quite inspiring about this story. The first one is about Mathika Mata, that as a laywoman she received instructions and a meditation object from the bhikkhus, and with diligence she practiced and was able to attain path and fruit of a non-returner, an anagami. And she did that in advance of the bhikkhus who had taught her but had not yet attained path and fruit. And then she had the ability to see with the divine eye, dipacakku, and so she could see that the bhikkhus were ripe for attainment, and all they needed was to be provided with suitable conditions such as the proper food. And so with the generosity, she offered that to the monks, and conducive conditions, she built a monastery. So there's much to be inspired by her practice. Having done that, the bhikkhus all attained arahantship. So more merit for Mathika Mata. Now when it comes to the other monk who came later on, and he was apprehensive after asking Mathika Mata whether she could read his thoughts, one could assume that he was apprehensive from the wrong perspective, But really also, if you look at it, he was probably apprehensive due to the wholesome quality as a trainee of hiri ottappa, and in particular hiri being moral shame. So there's something very lovely about this particular quality arising in the monk. That is what probably drove him to leave, the shame of still having unwholesome thoughts. So when he returned to the Buddha said to him, no, persist. And clearly the Buddha did not berate him. Well, that's not what the Dhammapada commentary tells us. And so the fact that it doesn't appear that the Buddha berated him or reproved him goes to show that what was arising was a wholesome quality. So with a wholesome quality, he asked him to return to the village and to focus on his meditation object, just solely that meditation object, and to tame the mind. And so we don't hear about the ins and outs of his practice, but what we do see is that the fruit of his practice was he himself also attained arahantship. So there's something about persisting contained within this story. So there's much to be gladdened in the mind about this story. Many bhikkhus becoming arahants, and also this laywoman, Matthika Mata, attaining path and fruit of the non-returner. When we look at this verse in Pali, Dunniggahassa lahuno, so difficult to subdue or control. Lahuno is swift or light and quick. Yatthakāmanipātino, yatta is wherever. Kama, of course, is sensual pleasures or pleasure. Nipātino means chancing upon, flying towards, falling down upon. So that's where you get flying towards wherever there is pleasure or sensual pleasures. Cittassa damatho sādhu. It is profitable to tame the mind. Cittassa damatho is taming the mind, and sādhu is profitable or good. Cittaṁ, dantaṁ, sukhāvahaṁ. So cittaṁ, dantaṁ is a tamed mind. Sukhāvahaṁ is bringing happiness. So what we can see from this verse is it's difficult to subdue the mind. The mind is very swift, and it flies very swiftly towards what it finds pleasurable, where there are sense pleasures. So this is the reason the Buddha says it's profitable to tame the mind, because a tamed mind brings happiness. And what the Buddha is talking about here is supreme happiness. So the happiness of Nibbana, the happiness that is safe, secure, long-lasting. When it comes to the mind, the Buddha often throughout his teachings emphasizes 4 key words. The first one is tamed, dantaṁ. The second is guarded, cittaṁ. The third is protected, rakkhitaṁ. And the fourth is restrained, samvutaṁ. So if you go to the Anguttara Nikāya, chapter 1, and there's these discourses from 31 to 40, and essentially, if it's summed up, the Buddha says, Bhikkhus, I do not see even one other thing that when untamed, unguarded, unprotected, and unrestrained, leads to such great harm as the mind. The mind, when untamed, unguarded, unprotected, and unrestrained, leads to great harm. And then he says, Bhikkhus, I do not see even one other thing that when tamed, guarded, protected, and restrained, leads to such great good as the mind. The mind, when tamed, guarded, protected, and restrained, leads to great good. And there are many other places where the Buddha talks about these 4 terms, or specifically about taming the mind and the perfection of taming the mind. So it's very important to understand what the Buddha means. Our previous Poya session, the Uposatha session, we really looked at some of the ways to tame the mind and how it fits in with the Noble Eightfold Path and the development of the mind. If we now go to the Patthamakkama Sutta, this is Anguttara Nikāya chapter 4, discourse number 164. The Buddha talks about the taming practice, Dhammapatipada. Dhamma translates as taming, subjugation, restraint, or mastery. And he also talks about the calming practice, Samapatipada. Sama translates as calming or peaceful. So the Buddha says, and what is the taming practice? Here, having seen a form with the eye, a bhikkhu does not grasp its marks and features, since, if he left the eye faculty unrestrained, bad unwholesome states of covetousness and sadness might invade him. He practices restraint over it. He guards the eye faculty. He undertakes the restraint of the eye faculty. And then the Buddha explains the same thing for the ear faculty, the nose faculty, the tongue faculty, the body faculty, and lastly with the mind faculty, the Buddha says, having cognized a mental phenomenon with the eye, a bhikkhu does not grasp its marks and features, since if he left the mind faculty unrestrained, bad unwholesome states of covetousness and sadness might invade him. He practices restraint over it. He guards the mind faculty. He undertakes the restraint of the mind faculty. This is called the taming practice. So when you read that, that's very similar to our practice that we do with the Pamāda Vihāri Sutta, when we dwell with vigilance. So the idea is that when you restrain, you don't soak in all the marks and features or signs and features. You don't pollute the mind. And so when you don't pollute the mind, you are taming the mind. You have the ability to enter into the wholesome states, to make the body tranquil, to enter into higher concentration of mind. And so the mind gets happy and peaceful. And then the calming practice, samapatipada, the Buddha says, and what is the calming practice? Here a bhikkhu does not tolerate an arisen sensual thought. He abandons it, dispels it, calms it down, terminates it, and obliterates it. And then the same thing he says for not tolerating arisen thoughts of ill will, arisen thoughts of harming, and the same with bad unwholesome states, that whenever any of those arise, one abandons them, dispels them, calms them down, terminates them, and obliterates them. This is called the calming practice. These are the words that we've been through many, many times. Nadivaseti, not to endure those things, not to wait for them. Pajahati, to give them up, abandon them, renounce them. Vinodati, dispel, remove, drive out. Samati, calm down, appease, make even. And then we have bhyanti karoti, which means abolish it, remove it, get rid of it, terminate it. And then the last one is anabhavam gamati. So that's the obliterating it, make it go, send it to its complete cessation. So these are very strong words that the Buddha gives, and they escalate in terms of when you go from dispelling or abandoning them, like not enduring them, all the way to obliterate them. Really, if you think about it, there's energy that is being applied, so virya, but there's also wisdom. The reason you do it is you really see the right view. You really know and see the right view. And when that wisdom faculty kicks in, then of course you do not want to tolerate it at all. You want to completely get rid of it, because you know you've experienced the higher concentration of mind, you've experienced the tranquility and peace in the mind. When that's the case, you understand why the Buddha uses such strong words. And it's very interesting that it applies when you're trying to calm the mind. When you look at this calming practice, we've touched on this calming practice in many, many suttas. We've looked at it in training for the accomplishment of being energetic. We've looked at it as part of striving. We've also looked at it more recently in the Vittakasantana Sutta as the simile of a weak man being beaten down by a strong man. And so that's part of the calming practice. There's something very unique about the Buddha's teaching of the calming practice, because when you look at the words and you look at the imagery that comes up for calming, it's with a lot of effort that it comes. The Buddha gives different similes to help us understand and connect with the Dhamma. And there's this simile of the chariot in the Rathopama Sutta. This is Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 35, discourse 239. This particular simile is quite helpful. So the Buddha says, suppose, bhikkhus, a chariot harnessed to thoroughbreds was standing ready on even ground at a crossroads, with a goad on hand. Then a skillful trainer, a chariot of horses to be tamed, would mount it, and taking the reins in his left hand and the goad in his right, would drive away and return by any route he wants, whenever he wants. So too, a bhikkhu trains in protecting these 6 sense faculties, trains in controlling them, trains in taming them, trains in pacifying them. It is in this way, bhikkhus, that a bhikkhu guards the doors of the sense faculties. So we can see here that what's very important is the mastery behind how we train. Train in restraint, how we train in controlling our sense faculties, how we train in taming them and pacifying them. This is very much about how we train the mind. What's important in this simile is seeing ourselves as that very skilled trainer, skilled charioteer, that whatever route we take, we're able to guide in the direction when we leave and when we return. Protecting the six sense faculties, as we know from the Buddha's teachings, is of utmost importance. We're not soaking in and polluting the mind. And so when you are able to train in controlling them, in taming them and pacifying them, then this is very much one who guards the doors to the sense faculties. As we know, one of the accomplishments in terms of a trainee is being able to become accomplished in guarding the doors to the sense faculties. Indriya Guttadavaro. We need to become like this skilled charioteer, this skilled trainer, when it comes to how we guard our sense doors, how we guard our sense faculties. And so very much taming the mind involves taming the sense faculties. In the questions of King Milinda, there's an interesting dialogue between the king and Venerable Nagasena about the mind of an ordinary worldling and the mind of an Arahant. And the king asks, Venerable Nagasena, why is it that the ordinary worldling suffers both bodily and mental pain? And Venerable Nagasena replies, by reason, O king, of the untamed state of his mind. Just, O king, as an ox, when trembling with starvation, might be tied up with a weak, fragile, and tiny rope of grass or creeper. But if the ox were excited, then he would escape, dragging the fastening with him. Just so, O king, when pain comes upon him whose mind is untrained, his mind becomes excited, and with the mind so excited, he bends his body this way and that, and makes it grovel on the ground, and being thus untrained in mind, trembles and cries, and gives forth terrible groans. This is why the ordinary worldling, O king, suffers pain in body as well as in mind. Then the king asks, then why, sir, does the Arahant only suffer one kind of pain, bodily, that is, and not mental? And Venerable Nagasena then replies, the mind of the Arahant, O king, is trained, well practiced, tamed, brought under control and obedient, and it heeds his word. When affected with feelings of pain, he grasps firmly the idea of the impermanence of all things, so ties his mind as if it were to the post of contemplation, and his mind, bound to the post of contemplation, remains unmoved, unshaken, becomes steadfast, wanders not. Though his body may bend this way and that, and roll in agony by the disturbing influence of the pain, this is why it is only one kind of pain that the Arahant suffers, bodily pain, that is, and not mental. And then the king says, Venerable Nagasena, that indeed is a most marvelous thing, that when the body is trembling, the mind should not be shaken. Give me a reason for that. Suppose, O king, there were a noble tree, mighty in trunk, and branches and leaves, and when agitated by the force of the wind, its branches should wave. Would the trunk also move? And then the king replies, certainly not, sir. And then Venerable Nagasena says, well, O king, the mind of the Arahant is as the trunk of that noble tree. So again, this is another teaching that very similar to what we've heard of before from the Buddha, that the mind does not shake, that despite having to withstand bodily painful feelings, the second dart does not hit the Arahant, whereas for a worldling we know we get hit by two darts. The first dart is the painful physical feeling, and then the second dart is the painful mental feeling. This is why we train. We tame so that the mind does not shake. It restrains itself. It is controlled. We tame it so that despite feeling physical discomfort, whether it's in the meditation process or whether it's out in the world, when it comes to the mental side of it, we have tamed the mind. It does not shake. It does not bend. It does not go with what it is being influenced by. And so it stays steadfast. So this simile again of an Arahant's mind, that it is like the trunk of the tree that does not shake. Very powerful when you reflect on this. We'll finish with this sutta on the Blessed One. And this is from the Dona Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya chapter 4, discourse number 36. On one occasion the Blessed One was travelling along the highway between Ukata and Setavia. The Brahman Dona was also travelling along the same part of the highway. The Brahman Dona then saw the 1,000 smoked wheels of the Blessed One's footprints, with their rims and hubs complete in all respects, and thought, it is astounding and amazing. These surely could not be the footprints of a human being. Then the Blessed One left the highway and sat down at the foot of a tree, folding his legs crosswise, straightening his body, and establishing mindfulness in front of him. Tracking the Blessed One's footprints, the Brahman Dona saw the Blessed One sitting at the foot of the tree, graceful, inspiring confidence, with peaceful faculties and peaceful mind, one who had attained to the highest taming and serenity, like a tamed and guarded bull elephant with controlled faculties. So we can see that in the complete sense, when you practice, you're practicing towards realizing the wisdom of an Arahant, the mind of an Arahant, but then you see the highest of high in the Buddha, peaceful faculties, peaceful mind. The Buddha is the one that really attains the highest taming and serenity. So that is our inspiration, the mind of an Arahant, the mind of the Blessed One, the Buddha, the perfectly enlightened one. So we can end our session here. Let's share the merit with all sentient beings. May all beings be happy and well. May all beings be free from suffering. Blessings of the Triple Gem, wishing you well. Teruan Saranai.